Welcome back to Horntie Studios for another episode of True Crime Deep Cuts. I'm going to be doing this episode solo for you for this gruesome story. So it's going to be a little bit different than the other three that I've done with Blogger Girl, but she'll be back for other Idaho 4 episodes with me in the future. This is my fourth video in this new long-form series. Now, this is not a 666 seconds video, so the stopwatch isn't out. I'm talking about a topic that needs a little more time than that. It will be as long as it needs to be, but I know your time is valuable, so I won't waste it. Now, it's always important to point out, my videos are for informational purposes only. These are just my speculations and opinion. I'm not saying anyone's guilty of anything. Anything I mention is alleged. Now, I've got a disturbing story for you, and some of the details are going to get a bit graphic. So if that's not something for you, then you might want to bow out of this one. For the rest of you, you've been warned. Now, I've got a great guest lined up for this episode, someone that understands a job that many of us would run in the other direction from. You're going to see some clips from an interview that I did with a guy who worked in a morgue or has worked in a morgue for the past 20 years. His title is Forensic Pathologist Assistant, and because of his job, he'll be anonymously called Mike. I've covered his image in the video, but you'll get to hear him explain what he does and the disturbing details of this Harvard morgue scandal. This was one of the more darkly fascinating interviews I've had the privilege to do. Now, I want you to hear Mike explain a bit about his experience, his education, and training to do his job. I also asked him what got him interested in this line of work, and I think his answer may surprise some of you, but I'm thinking others may kind of expect it and may throw up the horn. So let's check this out. So a forensic pathologist assistant sounds like a very interesting job. So why don't you kind of let us know what does that job entail? I mean, because not everybody's going to completely get what you do.
Well, what we do is when someone dies and they have to come into the medical examiner's office, we have to intake them, which entails bringing them in, putting them onto one of our stretchers. Then we have to weigh the body, measure the body, get those stats, enter all into the computer, undress the body, catalog the clothing they have, any personal belongings they have, and if it's anything of value, we put in a safe. And then we basically take the body in for pictures. It needs pictures of how the body came into us. And in certain types of cases, we need to x-ray the bodies. And that's everything that first starts before any thing goes on with any kind of autopsy. Or there's three different things that we can do with a body. If someone comes in and they die at home, and it's been a certain amount of time, 6 months or so, since they've seen their personal doctor, one of our doctors has to sign a certificate for them. So it's called an external exam. So we can do that. We can do an external exam that we take toxicology on. And then there's, of course, the autopsy, which is, we only do full autopsies where I am, which is body and head.
Okay. Now, does everybody get an autopsy, or is it just certain cases?
There's certain cases that have to be, like anybody that dies in police custody, and if they're in the county jail, they have to be autopsied. Then there's cases where families don't know why someone died, so they want to know, and then we do family requests. We do a lot of cases that sometimes seem like the cause, but families still want to know. So we go ahead and do the autopsies.
How long does it take, like typically for like an adult autopsy from beginning to end?
Usually anywhere from hour and a half on, usually about an hour and a half, 2 hours on one case. Some cases are quicker. Some cases take a lot longer.
Sure.
It depends what happened. Like a homicide case, they could take hours and hours and hours.
Oh, I could
crazy.
see that. Yeah. I mean, enough of the true crime stuff I watch, I can only imagine it. Really fascinating. So what kind of education and training, Mike, do you have to do the job that you do, and how long have you been doing it?
Well, where I am, you need a degree in science. So what I had was an associate's in applied science, and I majored in mortuary science. I went to school to be a funeral director, is what I went to school for. So I got my funeral director's license, and I did that for 6 years, and then I got the opportunity to go to the medical examiner's office, so I went there, and there I just did it was on the job training.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So and
how
long you been doing it?
I've been there 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's like I said, to most people watching or listening, it's just like a very fascinating thing, because it's just, for most of us, it just seems like, so out there, you know what I mean? But for you, it's just so commonplace,
Yeah.
So what got you interested in doing that job? And most people would, like I said, cringe at the thought of having to do that. But what got you interested?
My answer is always, I blame the music.
I was just going to ask you if you've been listening to like Cannibal Corpse and got inspired,
Yeah, I mean, when I was 13, 14, listening to crazy music, all the death metal and stuff, and it spiraled from there. The horror movies, and then it just so happened, a couple of friends in school, and we were talking, and wondering how all these processes occur.
Right.
And I went home. I was probably like 17 years old, and I went home and I said to my mother, I'm so curious on how they do things with the bodies when people die. And it was a few days later, she went down to college in town, and she picked up all this information for me. And she goes,
wow,
"Why don't you go to college for it?"
That's amazing. Of course, nowadays they'd have locked your ass up,
Yeah.
That's when we did that West Memphis 3 story, and they're talking about that Damien Eccles and all his writing and stuff. And I'm like, man, hold my beer. I was doing stuff a lot worse than that. I can't believe they didn't lock me up. It's just, that's scary stuff, but we're goofing a little bit. But I mean, honestly, that's a profession that not very many people can do it. So it's an amazing thing that you can do it. And that's obviously a very marketable skill to have, really.
Right.
You're not going to go to a, temp agency and find somebody to, do what you do, so it's, and I used to work with hazardous materials, and somewhat similar. There's a lot of training and licensing you need to do. You just can't throw somebody off the street doing it. It's its own thing. So I kind of get that. Now that we know we're talking to a person with a lot of experience working in a morgue, let me explain what the Harvard morgue scandal is. Now, this is a current case that just broke last year. The fact it happened at the prestigious Harvard University is definitely a headline grabber. We've heard about people donating their bodies to science. Well, when the people that donated their bodies to the Harvard Medical School did that, they probably envisioned something far different than what had been going on for 5 years, from 2018 to 2023. Now, the manager of the morgue, Cedric Lodge, and his wife Denise allegedly started selling pieces from the bodies that were donated. Cedric and his wife had hired a lawyer and have not made any public statements. They've pled not guilty, along with most everyone else involved in this mess. The information that's been reported comes from court documents. Now, I asked Mike about this scandal to get his interesting perspective. This Harvard morgue scandal, Mike, that's the main reason we're here doing this, but I wanted to get a little background. What did you think about this when the news broke? Because I was like, holy crap. I mean, Cedric Lodge, he's the manager of the morgue, and he's indicted for selling body parts, and his wife's involved. I mean, it was a mess, man. What were your thoughts when you heard about it?
My thoughts were, here we go again. Everybody already thinks we're ghouls, and they're gonna, they're gonna look at what this guy did and think, oh, everybody must do that around the country, and all the officers. Here we go.
I never thought about that. That's interesting. Right. Yeah, I'm sure. Because it's not, this isn't the first time this has happened, but this is just really, really over the top. I mean, I'm just wondering, how does something like that happen? I mean, what kind of accountability is there, Mike? I mean, we know when I interviewed Nico and he was talking about taking little pieces of the bodies home with them and all the blood and all this. So it was the same kind of question of how does that even happen? I mean, is there strict accountability in these morgues like that, or Harvard? Yeah. I mean, geez.
Well, that's the thing. Where I'm at, everybody has a key card, and there's certain doors that you have access to, and certain people don't have access to those doors, so they know who goes in and in which doors, and it's marked what time you went in the door, who you are, and my thing is that if nobody's looking for something, it's probably gonna, not be something, that they catch right away, because if you're not thinking anybody's doing anything wrong, you're not gonna pull someone's card and say, okay, why'd you go in this door at this time?
Right.
There's no reason for you to go in there, or something happened in that room. Let's pull the card. If there's no one looking for something, they're probably not going to find it.
Yeah, I mean, if that's like the last thing people are thinking about at Harvard, I'm assuming, that somebody's doing that, because that's just absolutely over the top, and that's probably what he realized he was going to be able to get away with this,
Right.
But that just always made me wonder, like, man, that just seems like somebody would get caught, but. I mean, these were bodies that were donated to Harvard for their anatomical gift program. And I mean, I can't imagine, getting a hold of these families when something like this, breaks. I mean, what kind of, who would deal with that at that level, do you think? I mean,
when something like that happens, it's the top people there. The administration is going to look hard on people, and they're going to look into what's going on, and they're going to be at fault themselves, because everything starts from the top and goes down. Mm-hmm. So who they put in charge, who they allow to have access to certain areas, and with this guy, he's giving basic tours.
I know. I couldn't believe that. People that wanted to buy body parts were allowed into the morgue to pick and choose like they were at Ponderosa Steakhouse or something. Like, what in the world is going on with that? That just totally floored me. Like, what the balls on this guy was just really unbelievable. That's just outrageous. I mean, do they let people just... you said you have key cards. How do you handle visitor? Would that be able to be done, or to be able to let them in without some sort of roster of who's coming in and out, that sort of thing?
There could be, because where I'm at, the back door to the morgue, there's a button that's connected to the door, and you can, when someone, say for instance, when a funeral director comes, they don't have their own personal access to it, so you have to let them in. So you basically buzz them in so they can come in that way. They're on camera, but if nobody's watching the cameras, nobody's
Right.
like who's looking at the tape and going, you know what, let's look at,
Right.
September 2nd at 3 o'clock and who came in
Right.
the door.
Right. With a
So, I mean,
backpack or a duffel
right.
bag or something,
Yeah. Stack of
Nobody's
cash.
going to think there's like a foot and like a
Right.
hand in there, Like you
Yeah.
said, if you're not looking for it, I could see where it could go, unknown for quite some time. But, it's just, this was going on from 2018 to 2023. And they're saying it could involve 350 to 400 bodies. But these people weren't very smart about it. I mean, they were using the mail, they were using PayPal. Like, I saw one of the PayPal transactions had brains in like the PayPal message. Like, seriously?
It's not the smartest crew,
No.
because you think you put up like code words for it, not
Right.
exactly, and putting brains with like so many eyes.
Yeah, a bunch of eyes in it. Yeah, so stupid. That was interesting to hear Mike's thoughts on that. In case you haven't seen them, here are a few images from some of the dolls that McLean was selling. Katrina McLean owns a store called Cat's Creepy Creations in Peabody, Massachusetts, and she was quoted as saying, "I paint creepy dolls and play with dead things for a living." Now, her dolls were sometimes made with human bones or displayed with human skulls. These dolls are beyond creepy. She was arrested and has pled not guilty. Now, another customer that I mentioned was Joshua Taylor, and he has an Instagram store that was selling ghoulish stuff as Angry Beard Antiques. Things like pictures of skulls, bones, post-mortem pictures, and even deceased children. He was also arrested and pled not guilty. Jeremy Pauly is another one of the customers that I mentioned, and he's pretty freaky looking with half his face tattooed, lots of piercings, and some horns. He's also done something wild with his teeth that I really can't explain, other than it kind of reminds me of shark teeth. Now, he pled guilty last year to conspiracy and interstate transportation of stolen property, and he got 2 years of supervised probation. Now, Cedric Lodge was only one of several people that he purchased things like that from. So to me, that's hardly enough time after all the things that they found in his house when he was arrested. He must have had a good lawyer and maybe agreed to testify against Lodge and his wife in exchange for that extremely light sentence. Now, we'll have to see how this one plays out in court with the others. Doing the research for this video, I was surprised to see that a similar incident happened at the morgue at UCLA back in 2004. It's so eerily similar to the Harvard case, with a former director of the Willed Body Program and a former morgue employee involved with selling the body parts of hundreds of cadavers. Let's hear what Mike had to say about this one. We also get into the satanic panic a bit and how it relates to the subject. But yeah, that's just really dumb. I mean, to not cover your tracks at least somewhat, I think they just got real lazy about it, like we hear about with serial killers.
Yeah,
Bundy said, the first one, you're real careful, then you just start getting lazy, and
Yeah.
we
I was
do
gonna
those
say,
stories a lot.
That's how so many people got caught. They're so used to it, they just get lazy, and they don't think like they used to. And I mean, to have that many possible, bodies that parts were taken from is just insane. The amount of,
Yeah.
I mean, there must have been so many bags going in and out of this
Right.
morgue.
I know.
Plus, you're on the campus of Harvard, so I mean,
Right. Yeah, it's just so bizarre that they pulled this off. And I saw some of them he was bringing to his house in New Hampshire and doing whatever he was doing there. And then his wife was helping him and they were shipping them out. And it was just, quite the operation they had going on there. It's just really just nuts to think for 5 years this was going on. I mean, think about that, 400 bodies, that's like almost 100 bodies a year. I mean,
Right.
that's nuts.
Yeah.
So I heard, we were talking about the buyers that they let to come in. I just, that just really blew my mind. But most of it, I think, was done at the house, but they were letting some of them come in. Maybe their Patreon members got to come in and they had some kind of Patreon set up or so. I don't know. Wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't. And it's alleged that Lodge took the body parts, they said, to the Goffstown, New Hampshire, and his wife Denise was part of it. And then there were 2 other people attached to this, or 3 others that were attached to the case that were, buying and selling these, for whatever their business was. So certainly a market for it. It's just really, really crazy, to think that, that there'd be that many people that would want that stuff,
Right. There's people are a fan of the macabre.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it comes down to, and they're not thinking of it as like this is someone's loved one. They're just thinking, oh, this is cool. I got I'm getting this body part or something. So
yeah, I can't understand it because that'd be like the last thing I would want in my house. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Jesus. Now, one of these buyers, Katrina McLean, she was buying skulls from Lodge to use for these creepy dolls that she made. Did you see any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I watched a couple of videos of hers on YouTube.
Oh shit!
Some of them are pretty cool. How she made like the faces to make it look almost like some of them almost look like a decomposition setting in.
Yeah, I saw that.
But
wow.
Yeah, I mean, she must have had a market for people that like those kind of dolls.
Yeah, there were some dolls that were holding a real human skull. That's what she bought some of the skulls from him. Like,
that's crazy.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that's really messed up. So she's in hot water now, of course. And then the guys that got busted, Joshua Taylor, I don't know a whole lot about his story, but Jeremy Pauley, he's the one that's just like a freak show. He's got like horns and half his face is tattooed.
Right.
Teeth are like razors. I don't even know what's going on with that, but doing some super nasty stuff online. I mean, they went to his house. They said there was buckets of kidneys and livers and brains, and he had 2 stillborn babies in his house. I mean, like, what in the world, man?
Yeah, that's wrong. Another guy that's giving us a bad name, and
probably a metalhead, right? So
exactly,
we get thrown under the bus all the time.
What are you doing with the organs? That's what I want to know, because they're going to go bad. I mean,
right.
You go to the supermarket, you buy a steak, and you leave it around for a few days or so. It's going to go bad. So same thing with human organs. They're going to rot. So
yeah, I can't imagine how bad that wherever he was living had to smell. I mean, it just had to be pretty disgusting, unless he had them refrigerated or something. But still, I mean, just my God.
After so much time, they're gonna go bad.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know what he was doing with them either, but just horror show stuff. But he's been in trouble with the law before, I saw. So he's kind of was on the radar apparently. So they got this guy for going across state lines. It's a federal bit now because it's mailing it. So he's definitely in a bunch of trouble. And the fact that they were using PayPal and everything, just documenting it and just really hanging themselves with it,
Yeah.
I don't know.
You can't, just some things you have to think, like you can't use the postal service. That's government, that's federal. Right. That's when they're gonna come hard at you. And
they would have been better off having like a courier or something do it. Some private courier maybe would have been better off.
Meet somewhere or something.
I don't want to put any ideas in your head, Mike. You're almost retired, man. Don't blow it. Don't blow it.
Exactly.
Let's change the subject. Now, what's crazy though, Mike, is that this is not the first time this has happened. I saw it happen at UCLA in 2003, and I'm sure you've heard of other cases like this, but are there any others notable ones that you wanted to mention?
I just want to say with the UCLA one, the one guy was saying how the guy that was getting the parts, he was saying how he was an innocent man, he was doing it all legit, but at first he was doing through checks. He was paying for stuff through checks, and then it went to cash. So when you're paying stuff with cash, you know what you're doing.
Right.
There's no
Right.
there's no why switch from checks to cash all of a sudden.
Right.
You know something's up, and you're doing something shady. So he's as guilty as the guy that was selling it. He tried to make it I'll give back the organs. He's trying to give back the organs to the place. It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've heard of this over the years, but we did that Burke and Hare episode, was it last year or the year before, with those grave robbers, that would provide the corpses to the medical schools. I mean, back in the day, that was how it was done, So, yeah. I mean, this kind of thing is certainly nothing new. I mean, that was back in the early 1800s, like the 1820s or 30s in Scotland. But, that's been going on, for a long time. I mean, the selling of bodies, and like you said, people love the macabre. I mean, we talked about the Ilsa Koch episode where there was all these, tattoos. She kept the skin with the tattoos, and people were buying those, and the lampshades and stuff like Ed Gein style. I mean, people are just drawn to it. And like you said, being that we're metalheads, especially the more extreme stuff. I mean, there's a lot of, songs about this stuff, but when you can, what a lot of people don't understand, what you and I understand it, but a lot of people don't get it, is that it's okay to listen to that and not be like going out and doing it. You know what I mean? Exactly. So, people I never hear people give Stephen King crap for writing stories like he writes. So I never got why metal, seemed to get, more scrutiny than somebody writing horror. And I'm a writer, and I get it. I just, I've always wondered why that kind of stuff seems to get a pass, but the metal stuff seems to, always get the stern look and all that kind of crap,
It's always been like that. Even in school, in high school, every once in a while, one of these programs will come out, and Satan worshiping, and then all of a sudden, back in the day, you had to wait for a certain day to watch something, and people walk around. Well, Thursday, you're watching the Satan show. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, you and I, we grew up in that satanic panic nonsense. Right. We talked about the West Memphis 3, but that was a legitimate thing. And on YouTube, I have the 666 seconds videos, and I had a few people like freaking out about it. And it's like, it's a goof. I'm not doing it because I worship the devil, and here I've got Anton LaVey over my shoulder, but I got like 12 of these masks. I've been rotating them around in here, but I figured for you, I busted out the LaVey. So
nice. Thank you.
Of course. I also talked with Mike about the possible criminal penalties that may come down with Cedric Lodge, his wife, and the others. Plus, he adds an interesting bit of fallout that will likely come from this scandal that I hadn't thought of. But yeah, I mean, it's just wild to think that this is not the first time it's happened. But of course, now that this is a current case, it'll be interesting to see what kind of time they might get. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm interested in that too.
Yeah, because it's the interstate, committing a crime across state lines, with the federal, right. I'm not sure. And it won't be, if it's a federal trial, it won't be televised. So that'd be a bummer if that's the way they go with it. If it's in New York, I don't know if New York televises trials or not, but maybe it might be county to county discretion. But if it's federal, I found out they don't do any federal trials by camera.
Yeah, I think the UCLA guy got I think he got somewhere maybe around 10 years or something like that.
Really?
So I think so. So it's, they're looking at time,
Yeah. And I know my dad was a parole officer out there, and there's some pretty rough places.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know if they would send them to, where they would send them, but no prison is going to be a good time. That's for sure. So far cry from his life at Harvard, making all that money he was making, but
They'll go to Clinton.
yeah, Clinton, not good. So anything you want to add to this, Mike? Appreciate you coming on, but anything that maybe you wanted to bring up that I didn't mention, or anything about this topic, or anything for that matter?
Well, the thing that sticks out is like when something like this happens, so now Harvard's program is looked at differently, and on the videos I watched and articles I read, they say, family's going to stop donating.
Sure.
And that's, it's always a killer too, because the reasoning behind all this is that, it's for medical students to learn, and they need this. So like when they get anatomical donations, it's very, good for them to
right.
practice on, because they need it, and it's what you need. You can only look at a skeleton so much. You need to look at an actual human body,
right?
And
it's a shame that this would inhibit somebody from either donating money or their loved ones. So that's a good point. That's definitely a sad thing, because I'm sure it not only affected them, but probably nationwide. I mean, people hear a story like that, like, I don't know if I'm going to do that with mom, kind of thing, So that's a good point. But thank you very much for doing this interview with me, Mike. I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me about such a bizarre and crazy case as this. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about it once it goes to trial. I'll be interested to see how it goes down. The Harvard morgue scandal is definitely a gruesome story, but as I mentioned when I was talking to Mike, this is not anything new. Grave robbing has been going on since the birth of mankind. The sale of body parts to people online and sending things by mail is really horrific to most of us, but it's the logical evolution of this very macabre practice. Check out the Murder, Metal, Mayhem podcast episode that we did on Burke and Hare, and I'll link to that down below. It's all about the subject of grave robbing, also known as resurrection men, and how widespread that practice was throughout Europe and the rest of the world. Well, thank you guys for checking out this episode of True Crime Deep Cuts. I want to thank Mike for doing the interview with me. The full 30-minute interview will be released in full to the channel soon after this episode comes out, so you don't want to miss that. There is a variety of content here on the channel. If you like shorter content, I've got the 666 seconds videos where each one is 666 seconds or less. Plus, I've done interviews with several of the YouTube true crime creators, as well as other interviews that I've done. I've done a couple of lives so far, and more will follow. There's also the Murder, Metal, Mayhem podcast available here, and I usually post videos from the feature segment here on the channel as well. I would like to thank the members of the Horns High Club. I appreciate all of you for your support. I also want to thank everybody that watches these videos and leaving comments. I'd love to hear what you think about this one, because it was definitely a strange story. So we'll see you guys next time for another episode of True Crime Deep Cuts.